What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Look, XRP's path to $250 isn't a dream anymore. The numbers are literally lining up in real time. Institutions are moving, regulations are all falling into place, and Ripple is positioning itself dead center in a multi-T-trillion-dollar transformation. If you walk away from this video still bearish, hey, that's on you. We're going to start right here. Ripple steps into the tokenization war. You ever watch history shift so quietly that only the people paying attention to it actually catch it? That's exactly what's happening right now because Ripple just stepped directly into the tokenized treasury arena and they didn't tiptoe in. They're entering the ring shoulder to shoulder with the institutions preparing to run this next era of global finance. And if you're serious about getting ahead of this next major financial shift, you need to get into the XRP Insiders Elite. It's extremely powerful for anyone trying to move faster than the crowd. You'll get exclusive insider level XRP alerts, deep dive strategy breakdowns, tools to master the millionaire mindset behind generational wealth, and the exact frameworks the quiet top 1% are using to position for massive upside. Plus, you get full access to all premium content and resources. It's in the video description below. Use code millionaire for 10% off. Now, Ripple stepping into tokenized treasuries is not a casual footnote. Tokenized treasuries are becoming the gateway to a new era of real-world asset dominance. People used to talk about RWAS like it was a distant prediction. Not anymore. The numbers are exploding, the demand is exploding, and the liquidity is lining up exactly where the institutions want to stand when the floodgates open. When Ripple aligns itself with Open Eden and other major players in this space, they're not experimenting. They're planting their flag in the future financial system. This is how the foundation of a high V-value XRP ecosystem is built, not through hype, but through structural positioning. These tokenized treasuries represent the early movement of what could become the backbone of a global 16 trillion RWA market. And Ripple is positioning itself at the center of the rails that move all that value. When you look at Ripple's involvement, it's not random companies being thrown together. You've got Lightseed, Fraction, Gate Ventures, Falcon X, Anchorage Digital, all backing tokenization as a service models that directly interface with traditional financial instruments like T-bills and yield-bearing digital dollars. These aren't crypto-exploring traditions preparing to dominate yield on-chain. They're not testing, they're positioning. And whether people want to admit this or not, XRP benefits every single time real-world liquidity gets closer to blockchain settlement, because tokenized treasuries require something most crypto projects simply don't have: regulatory grade compliance layers and institutional scale throughput. And guess who does? Ripple. This is why XRP has a legitimate runway to triple-digit valuations in the long term. The infrastructure is being built in real time, and it gets deeper because institutions do not, let me repeat, do not touch crypto settlement layers unless those layers are hardened like bank-level infrastructure. Ripple isn't just secure. They are aligned with the certifications that global financial institutions require before they even consider onboarding: HSM, FIPS, SOC 2 Type 2, ISO 27001. These aren't buzzwords. These are the fingerprints of systems designed to move trillions securely. When you want to move data, you use the internet. When you want to move money, you need rails with institutional grade protection. Every time Ripple enhances its security stack, XRP's future valuation quietly gets more credible. Now, this ties directly into the regulatory movement. If you caught that CNBC clip with the SEC chair, what he said might have sounded bland on the surface, but the translation is massive. The US is preparing to solidify a crypto market structure. That means the regulatory fog that's been suppressing institutional movement for over a decade is finally thinning out. And once the rules lock in, capital flows. Once capital flows, assets like XRP stop being speculative tokens and move into the category of infrastructure. This is the shift smart money has been waiting for. When regulation clarifies, money moves fast, and it moves in massive coordinated waves. Speaking of coordination, the recent synchronized whale accumulation across multiple exchanges wasn't random. When you see thousands of Bitcoin purchased in grouped bursts across Binance, Coinbase, Bitfinex, whale wallets, and more, that's not retail enthusiasm. That's institutional choreography. They know what's coming. They always move first. The market pumped on command because big players triggered it. Retail traders didn't cause that. Sentiment didn't cause that. Structure caused that. And whenever these coordinated inflows appear right before regulatory announcements, ETF filings, or macro liquidity changes, you better believe something larger is brewing underneath the surface. And then you look at Bank of America stepping in. This isn't a meme bank. This is one of the most conservative, risk-averse institutions in the United States. When they allow advisors to start allocating to crypto, even at 1% to 4%, that is not a suggestion that is a scheduled migration. Mass adoption isn't a prediction, it's a calendar event. And when banks participate, institutions follow. When institutions participate, infrastructure tokens become critical. XRP is built for settlement tokenization and cross-chain liquidity movement. Those are the exact lanes institutions care about. Now add to that the new ETF filings, real asset ETFs, not futures or derivatives. When projects like XRP appear on these lists, it signals something simple. Institutional pipes are being built directly into the assets that actually matter. If an asset has an ETF, it means real money wants exposure to it without friction. XRP is in that category, and that matters because ETFs are a bridge not for traders but for capital. They simplify onboarding for funds, banks, and asset managers who need compliance, custody, and deep liquidity handled for them. Ripple, meanwhile, continues to frame XRP as the settlement layer for the Internet of Value, something Chris Lawson has been explaining for years. Value moves differently than information. Information spreads freely. Value needs rails, rules, and trust. When you combine the Internet of Information with the Internet of Value and global shipping and goods mobility, that's full globalization. Blockchain and digital assets complete the system. XRP was literally engineered for this, and now even more signals are popping up. Vanguard opening access to crypto ETFs. Former eToro leadership, highlighting that retail entered crypto before institutions, meaning you're early. You're still early. The door hasn't shut yet, but you can feel it starting to swing. Stablecoin regulation now being shaped by the FDIC means the next wave of on-chain dollars will be fully compliant. And once that happens, the networks moving those dollars become the most valuable pieces of the system. XRP isn't just showing up in conversations anymore. It's becoming woven directly into the fabric of the new financial architecture. And as all these puzzle pieces keep snapping together, the picture becomes clearer. The transition from traditional settlement to blockchain settlement isn't theoretical. It's happening. And the networks that are built for speed, compliance, and global liquidity, those are the networks institutions are lining up behind. XRP is in that group. And honestly, it's one of the only assets in crypto that actually checks all the boxes institutions care about. Because think about it, these banks, asset managers, and payment giants aren't going to choose the fastest chain. They aren't going to choose the cheapest chain. They aren't going to choose the newest chain. They're going to choose the chain that reduces friction, satisfies regulators, and integrates into existing global systems without blowing anything up. That means compliance first, integration second, performance third, and Ripple built the entire XRP ecosystem around that exact order of priorities. That's why these sophisticated players keep gravitating toward it while the retail crowd argues online. Real value isn't built on hype, it's built on plumbing. Now combine that with the regulatory environment shifting right underneath everyone's feet. The United States, whether people admit it or not, is preparing to unlock blockchain finance at a level that we've never seen before. For years, regulation has been the biggest bottleneck, not technology, not adoption, not interest regulation. The moment the US flips that switch, trillions of dollars that have been sitting on the sidelines, not due to doubt, but due to rules, can finally start moving. And when that happens, utility assets explode because they go from maybe someday to plug and play infrastructure. XRP is literally built for the moment trillions flow across borders at machine speed. And when you zoom out, you can almost feel that moment getting closer. The crypto market isn't behaving like a retail market anymore. Prices aren't reacting to noise like they used to. There's a different energy under the surface. You can see it in the coordinated buying. You can see it in the way ETFs are being structured. You can see it in the way banks are preparing their clients for exposure. And you can see it in the way every major institution is suddenly talking about tokenization, not in future tense, but in present tense. These are all signals that the next phase of the market won't be defined by speculation. It's going to be defined by integration. Look at everything Ripple has been building for the past decade. ODL, XRPL upgrades, sidechains, tokenization modules, custody partnerships, global payment rails, interoperability frameworks, and compliance-driven infrastructure. None of this was about winning retail hype cycles. This was about preparing for the day when the world finally needs an internet of value, when money itself needs a new delivery system. And that moment is showing up right on schedule. And here's what people underestimate. When institutional liquidity enters a blockchain ecosystem, it doesn't trickle in, it surges in. Institutions don't scale slowly, they scale explosively. When one major bank moves, the next 10 follow. When one ETF opens, dozens follow. When one government updates its regulatory framework, every major financial player adapts. Money moves in waves, not ripples. And XRP is designed to be the rail that absorbs those waves with no friction. Think about tokenized treasuries for a second, because this is a massive part of the next phase. T-bills are the backbone of global liquidity. They are the safest, most demanded asset in the world. They are the foundation of the US financial system. And now they're moving on-chain because institutions want yield, speed, and transparency wrapped into one. Whoever controls the settlement layer for tokenized treasuries controls the plumbing for a huge percentage of global liquidity. Ripple stepping into that space is not small, it's foundational. It positions XRP as the connective tissue between real-world assets and blockchain rails. And while this is happening, you've got global banks talking openly about preparing for blockchain settlement. You've got governments building regulatory frameworks that specifically reference digital asset payment systems. You've got financial giants like BlackRock, Fidelity, and Franklin Templeton actively participating in the tokenization movement. These aren't crypto companies, these are trillion-dollar institutions. And they're not playing around, they're not experimenting, they're building. When players at that scale show up, the transformation isn't optional, it's inevitable. Now look at the structure of XRP compared to almost every other major crypto asset. Most networks break down when you scale them to institutional levels. They become too slow, too clogged, too expensive, or too unpredictable. XRP was designed from day one to handle institutional level throughput. XRP settles in seconds at predictable costs without congestion and with enterprise-level compliance options. It's literally the blueprint of what institutions need. That's why the narrative around XRP is shifting from, is it going to survive, to how big is it going to be when global settlement goes digital? And every time you see a new announcement, whether it's another country updating crypto laws, another bank testing tokenized assets, another ETF being filed, another payment corridor launching, it all points in the same direction. The transformation is expanding, the rails are forming, the infrastructure is locking into place, and the common denominator in all of these movements is a shift away from speculation and a shift toward real utility. That's the world Ripple has been building for, and that's the world XRP is meant to thrive in. Now picture this. Imagine a future where every stablecoin transaction, every tokenized treasury, every cross-border payment, every institutional settlement, and every global liquidity transfer happens on blockchain rails, billions flowing every day, trillions flowing every month. And with compliance, security, and speed being non-negotiable requirements, institutions will gravitate toward the rails that actually work. XRP is one of the few networks prepared to handle that kind of load without breaking. And then layer on the fact that major financial regulators, banking coalitions, and global oversight bodies are finally coordinating on digital asset frameworks. For the past decade, the regulatory world was chaotic, inconsistent, and fragmented. Now, for the first time, you're seeing alignment. US regulators are talking to global regulators. Europe, Asia, Latin America, they're preparing structured rules for digital money. And every time a rule is written, XRP becomes more viable. Clarity benefits infrastructure assets, not hype assets. Clarity benefits networks designed for compliance, not networks designed for speculation. And as more of these frameworks come online, XRP stops being a crypto asset with potential and starts becoming a core piece of the global payment stack. It becomes the rail that institutions trust because they understand it, they can regulate it, and they can build on it. And once that switch flips, utility isn't just possible. It becomes the dominant driver of value. That's where the triple-digit narrative starts to make sense. Not because of hype, not because of emotion, but because of liquidity flow, structural demand, and macro level integration. And when you combine everything happening right now, the institutional accumulation, the tokenization rush, the ETF openings, the banking access, the regulatory clarity, the infrastructure upgrades, you start to see the path forming. It's not about guessing anymore. It's about watching the pieces click into place exactly how Ripple predicted they would. And now we move into the next layer of this transformation where the real acceleration starts to appear and everything shifts from gradual adoption to explosive scale. This is not financial advice. The acceleration phase begins when the world no longer sees blockchain as an experiment, but as an efficiency upgrade that becomes unavoidable. That moment is unfolding now, and you can see it in how fast every major institution is shifting its language. A few years ago, the conversations were built around curiosity and exploration. Today, the tone has completely changed. Institutions aren't asking, should we adopt blockchain anymore? They're asking, which blockchain should we build on and how fast can we migrate? That shift is critical because it signals a global mindset transformation, one where blockchain isn't competing with traditional systems. It's enhancing them. And when systems enhance rather than replace, adoption happens exponentially faster. Look closely at how the financial sector is responding. Banks that once dismissed crypto are now racing to integrate digital assets. Payment giants that were hesitant are now building tokenization teams. Governments that avoided blockchain discussions are now creating regulatory frameworks at record speed. Every corner of the financial world is preparing for a new foundation where money moves like information. And once that foundation is accepted, the networks that offer reliability and compliance become the backbone of the system. XRP fits that requirement more naturally than almost any other digital asset. It is consistent, predictable, regulatory friendly, and engineered for high volume global traffic. This is where the concept of the Internet of Value becomes more meaningful, because when you realize money is simply data with rules, you start to see why the world needs a dedicated value layer the same way it needed an information layer decades ago. The Internet connected communication, blockchain connects liquidity. And when liquidity becomes programmable, transparent, fast, and global, the entire structure of finance changes. Settlement becomes automatic. Cross-border friction disappears. Value moves at the speed of software instead of the speed of paperwork. Institutions aren't interested in blockchain because it's trendy. They're interested because it solves trillion-dollar inefficiencies they've struggled with for decades. And when Ripple talks about global payment corridors, liquidity hubs, and enterprise connectivity, they're not theorizing. They're describing the structure of a financial network that needs a universal settlement asset at its center. XRP fills that role because it was designed specifically for it. And as the scale increases, so does the structural demand for a settlement token that can bridge assets without requiring every institution to rely on the same domestic currency. This is why XRP's role expands as tokenization expands. The more assets move on chain, the more value needs to be bridged between those assets, and the asset that performs that bridging becomes essential to the stability of the entire system. You also can't ignore the fact that the liquidity landscape is changing. Traditional liquidity providers are moving into digital markets. Large asset managers are building crypto trading teams. Quant funds are optimizing digital liquidity models. Market makers are integrating blockchain rails. These movements hint at future demand much larger than what the market is currently pricing in. Because once liquidity providers depend on blockchain rails, they require assets that maintain speed and reliability, even under extreme network demand. XRP's architecture was built for that environment from day one. No congestion, no unpredictable fees, no unstable performance. Predictability becomes a competitive advantage at scale, and XRP thrives under those conditions. Then you layer on global settlement initiatives happening quietly behind the scenes, central banks experimenting with real-time tokenized settlement, corporate treasury networks preparing pilot programs using digital assets, international financial bodies coordinating settlement standards that look eerily similar to what Ripple has been building for years. These aren't coincidences, they're alignments, and every alignment increases the probability that XRP becomes part of the global liquidity fabric rather than a speculative asset floating on the sidelines. And adoption rarely looks loud in the beginning. It happens through integrations hidden in regulatory updates, testing frameworks, pilot projects, cross-border trials, and infrastructure partnerships. By the time the average person realizes the transformation is underway, it's already deeply rooted. Blockchain settlement will follow that same path. One day people will look back and wonder when the shift happened. But the truth is that it's happening gradually right now, step by step, integration by integration, regulation by regulation. And XRP continues to appear in the center of the conversation, even when no one is trying to draw attention to it. Combine everything, the regulatory alignment, the institutional movement, the tokenization surge, the settlement upgrades, the liquidity shift, the ETF pipelines, and the global banking access. And you get a clear picture of a financial world transitioning toward digital infrastructure that requires a fast, neutral, compliant settlement asset. XRP stands directly in that doorway, and once the door opens fully, the valuation models change forever. Triple-digit prices stop sounding far-fetched because they become mathematical outcomes of liquidity flow instead of emotional predictions. And this is where timing matters most for the everyday investor. Institutions move in phases. First they observe, then they experiment, then they build, then they allocate. And once they allocate, they scale. We are moving into that final phase. The allocation is beginning, the scaling comes next. When scaling arrives, assets like XRP don't climb slowly, they reprick. They jump to new ranges that reflect utility instead of speculation. And when that moment arrives, the people who understood what was coming, the people who positioned early, are the ones who benefit the most. XRP's story is no longer about what if, it's about when. The infrastructure is forming around it, the rails are forming beneath it. The global systems are preparing for it. Whether it hits 50, 100, or 250 is ultimately dictated by utility-driven liquidity, not internet hype. And liquidity is coming whether retail believes it or not. The evidence is everywhere for those with the patience to look a little deeper. And as this transformation accelerates, being informed becomes one of the biggest advantages a person can have. Because the people who make the smartest moves in these transitional eras are the ones who understand the quiet signals long before they become headlines. They're the ones who recognize when the world is shifting under the surface. And right now, the world is shifting fast. Faster than most people realize, faster than markets are pricing in, faster than institutions are publicly admitting. But the signs are there for anyone paying attention. If you're serious about staying ahead of this massive financial shift, getting into XRP Insider's Elite is one of the smartest moves you can make. You'll unlock private XRP alerts, deep dive insights used by high-level investors, mindset strategies for building real wealth, and full access to premium research that keeps you ahead of the crowd. The link is in the video description, and if you use code MILLIONAIRE, you'll get 10% off instantly.